He says, we've heard this before. They're not leaving. It's not feasible. And boom, we've never heard this before with the ACC. And I think this is a common mistake that people make. People compare what we've heard about other teams leaving other conferences, and they're like, oh, yeah, Florida State and Clemson are gone. And again, I just point out what happened in the Pac-12, what happened in the Big 12, nothing similar, not remotely close to what's going on in the ACC. And I think this is a popular fan sentiment when it comes to Florida State and when it comes to what's happening in the ACC. And I think it's very important that we point that out because as we've talked about for months on this show, and you're going to hear from Jim Phillips, the commissioner of the ACC in a moment, this situation with the ACC, it's going to be awfully difficult for Florida State and Clemson to get an outcome that they would describe as desirable, a positive outcome, a winning outcome, because simply put, there is no mechanism outside of paying $500 million or more for Florida State and Clemson to leave the ACC. And I think Jim Phillips, who's standing on business in the ACC, is making that very clear. This is not the Pac-12 where the grant of rights was coming to an end. This is not the Big 12 where the grant of rights was coming to an end. This is the ACC where the grant of rights will never end. It's like in the history of man, the grant of rights in the ACC will outlast us all, or at least that's what it feels like. And I thought it was very interesting that Jim Phillips made the point to go out of his way to say exactly what we've said on this show, that Florida State and Clemson not only signed the grant of rights once, but twice.
As I turn my attention to the year ahead, I must directly address the ongoing disputes with two of our members about the contracts they each signed twice and whether they will honor those agreements. With multiple ongoing legal cases, there are limits to what I can say, but I can state that we will fight to protect the ACC and our members for as long as it takes. We are confident in this league and that it will remain a premier conference in college athletics for the long-term future.
I mean, first of all, I thought he said they signed it twice.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we don't know what we're talking about. I mean, we don't know anything. We don't have sources. We don't know anything. But we've only pointed it out a million freaking times on this show that you're not going to get away, whether it's in the court of law or the court of public opinion, from the fact that you signed it not once but twice. And,
without duress.
And I just don't know, like, I'm telling you, the ACC has their ducks in a row. Jim doesn't have to sit up there and be nervous about the conference melting down because Florida State and Clemson have nowhere to go. They don't have a way out. Even if you had a way out, I'm not sure that you'd have, a smooth path, an easy path to get anywhere else. As we've seen, people have commented on the fact that Florida State is damaged goods, if you will.
Well, and depending on how much you believe what Greg Sankey said at SEC Media Days, I agree. I think people like to romanticize, the destruction of the Pac-12, the Big 12, the ACC. I think people love to romanticize that. But again, I just ask you, if you are a lawyer and you are defending Florida State, how do you get away from the fact that they signed that grant of rights not once but twice, and they did it knowingly and willingly, which is why I also think that's not their argument in court. Their argument in court is that there is somehow some nefarious dealings between the ACC and ESPN that merit and warrant the meltdown of the grant of rights, the invalidation of the grant of rights, that adding SMU, Cal, and Stanford, Calford, to the conference was a breach of fiduciary responsibilities. Again. But notice they're not saying, well, we didn't know what we were signing. Or, oh, well, they're not arguing the grant of rights. They've tried for, and it depends on who you ask, but a minimum of 5 years to find a way out of it.
Right.
They've spent over $100 million in legal fees alone
trying to find a way to get out of it. So again, if there was a mechanism in place, and I know you're probably tired of hearing me say this, they would be out of it already. So I ask you point blank, what's the mechanism to get Florida State and Clemson out of it? There's one. It's $500 million. The only other way they're getting out of this is if a judge somehow finds and rules in their favor. And we should at some point, I would think in the next 10 days, I would think, begin to understand what is in writing between the ACC and ESPN. Because if we don't, and if Florida State does not come out and make an argument that somehow that document or that agreement is flawed and violates the grant of rights and violates a fiduciary responsibility and violates contract law, because that's the only way that they're winning this case, is if there's a magic bullet in the contract between ESPN and the ACC. And I know I say this all the time, but I'm going to say it again. Understand that that contract between ESPN and the ACC is completely different than the grant of rights. Those are two separate agreements between two different entities. Between the members of the ACC and the ACC Conference, that's the grant of rights. Between the ACC and ESPN, that's the TV contract. And Florida State just got a judge's order to see an unredacted copy of the TV contract between ESPN and the ACC. And so they have a period of time to review that contract and make an argument that it's invalid. It better be sooner than later, because if there is something in that deal that invalidates that contract, it's going to stand out in big, bold letters. It's not going to be something that you're going to have to find in the fine print. In contract law, and you go back and you look at any contract dispute, 9 out of 10 times, it is in big, bold, obvious terms. This is a violation. This is wrong. This is grounds to get out of it. And usually when that happens, it's almost immediate. So I also go back to what I've argued previously and what I've been told by sources close to that situation, which is we'd have known this by now, because the ACC and ESPN would have settled with Florida State and Clemson. They would never have given them access to an unredacted copy of that contract, because I think that's exactly what Florida State and Clemson thought they wanted. And I actually think that it is a honeypot. I think that that is exactly what the ACC wanted Florida State and Clemson to get, an unredacted copy of that contract, so that they would fall into that trap of there's nothing here. Because you can't tell me that the ACC fought that court order. You can't tell me that the ACC, who all along, I remind you, has said, hey, just come to our headquarters. Well, you're free to look at the contract. You're free to look at the grant of rights. It's all right here. You just can't take it off campus of the ACC headquarters, and you can't make copies of it, and you cannot send it out electronically. And so Florida State automatically said, well, you're hiding things. Okay. Get a court order and we'll send it to you. Well, now they got a court order and they sent it to them, and we have not heard hide nor hair. And every day that goes by, and I believe the window is past now that Florida State and its legal team has that document. Every day that goes by now, you got to wonder if there's something at all in that document.
Well, and at what point do you run out of runway here? I mean, at what point do you get to a place where you say, hey, yeah, we're tired of spending hundreds of millions of dollars on legal fees and, just burning this hole in our financial pocket.
Yeah.
Especially when we look around, the landscape of college football, and there's all these other conversations happening, like, all the stuff that we talked about last week with Sankey and the Super League, and, private money and where the CFP is going. And, we're in a time when, as a Power 4 conference school, you really got to manage your money well. You really got to make sure that not only do you have all your bills paid, if you will, but you have future revenue coming in, that you have a plan to continue to raise that revenue and continue to keep your school on strong financial footing. And it always amazes me that Florida State seemingly doesn't worry about that. Seemingly there is no restriction to how much money you'll spend on legal fees and how much money you're willing to put into what can only be described as a a black hole of endless spending. I mean, that's what you're talking about. You have not yet found a way to win this situation that you're in, that you, I might add, caused. You're the one who forced this issue. And now you're starting to see that, yeah, maybe there's not a way out of this thing. We did sign a contract, and now our feet are going to be held to the fire on it. And it is what it is. Sometimes you don't win. Like, they're not going to win here. So I'm just curious, what's next? Is it just a thing where this just kind of slowly but surely fades into the background and people just stop talking about it, and that's kind of our answer? Or is there some type of definitive ruling that we get that kind of puts it to bed, and then Florida State's got to figure out what's next? Like, and by the way, for Clemson, I don't know. Like, I feel like we never hear from Clemson on this stuff. I feel like Clemson just signed on to this and was like, yeah, we'll just go along for the ride, and you guys can do what you want to do. I mean, you can't tell me, if people view Florida State as damaged goods, that Clemson's not at least somewhat being hurt by the image of being involved.
But what is Clemson going to say? Clemson doesn't win anymore on the football field. Dabo, I think there's almost a certainty that Dabo's reputation is damaged as a winner. And I don't know what leverage Clemson has. If you think about the comparison to Clemson and Florida State, on the surface, well, you'd much rather have Florida State, or would you? Because you get into these Greg Sankey comments last week, and you get into people telling us for over a year now that they're trouble. And you go back to Bobby Bowden talking about how they took the ACC route because they didn't want to have to fight through the SEC and it was going to be easier to win. What is it about Florida State that makes them a better partner than Clemson, or a more attractive brand than Clemson? Right now, I would say not much. I don't think either one of them has a clear path to the SEC or the Big Ten. I don't see that. And it's why I continue to tell you there was never going to be notice given that they were leaving the conference at ACC Media Days. And everybody was, and again, I tell you to go back and look at the way people tweeted about this, and that Clemson and Florida State are leaving. And, well, why are they deleting those tweets now? Why do you not see those people all over the hey, we told you? Because there was never a way for them to make that announcement.
Oh.
So if we're sitting here and we're talking about the reality of this situation and what the end game in the ACC looks like, it's one of two things. A judge rules in favor of Florida State, which I don't think we have any idea where that stands, because we really haven't gotten even a step into this process in a courtroom yet. Or they pay their $500 million to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to go private money, are you really going to take your private money and buy your way out of a conference, not knowing if you have a home? I mean, hell, if you're private money, are you investing in Florida State after what Greg Sankey said on 1010XL in Jacksonville last week?
So you take Georgia just because it's easy to remember. Within the league, they play at Ole Miss, finished with a win over Penn State, had 2 losses last year to Georgia and to Alabama. They play at Alabama, and they play at Texas. This is Georgia.
Right.
I mean, who's got 3 games like that on their schedule?
Yeah.
And they play Florida, too. Yeah. Don't forget that.
Well, no, that's right. I'm going. The neutral site, but I'm going to away.
Yeah.
And then they open with Clemson.
Right.
They finish with Georgia Tech, and there's a lot in between. How are you evaluating that against other schedules?
Yeah.
That could be – think last year, that was one of the 4 best teams, period.
And there's no question.
There's people in your listening audience that say, well, there it goes again.
Yeah.
We didn't stomp our feet.
Right.
We didn't, fly banners over places. That was one of the 4 best teams.
Right.
They lost 1 game in 2 years. Bad second half, second quarter, third quarter. And in the future, if they're 9-3 compared to a 10-2 or 11-1, the standard is not 10-2 or 11-1. It's the best teams.
Well, what that
Savage.
I mean, it is as simple as you can put it. That Florida State is damaged goods. So, okay, you get private money, you buy your way out of the ACC grant of rights, you get your broadcast rights back to do what with them? I don't know either, because does a scheduling alliance with the Big 12, which is the hot rumor,
does that put you in a position or a better position to make the college football playoff than you are in the ACC, where you are the top dog by far, not close?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It doesn't put you in a better position to make money. Like,
But that's ultimately how you make your money now.
yeah,
Is you got to go to the college football playoff. I just don't see, in this ever-changing face of college football, what does winning look like now for Florida State? Because if they win this lawsuit and they get out of the ACC, let's say, I still believe in my heart of hearts, from what I've been told, that the SEC would take Florida State. I understand Greg Sankey putting his tail feather up and we didn't stomp our feet or fly back. Totally get it. You're turning down a brand like Florida State in the SEC. You're turning down a chance to absolutely own the state of Florida with the two best football brands in that state, Florida and Florida State.
yeah, probably not. Probably not. You obviously,
Come on.
Obviously for the SEC, there's a lot of value there. I also think there's a lot of value for the Big Ten, but I think the Big Ten would be a much better fit for Clemson than it would be for Florida State. And the problem is that I think what a lot of people who were pushing the scheduling alliance situation recently, what they don't want to tell you is that the only way that these two schools are getting to a different conference is at the end of this grant of rights, or if there's major change throughout all of college football with the Super League situation and how that impacts everything. So, because I do think there's still some unknown around, like, not whether or not we're going to get one, but more like, hey, are we still going to have 4 conferences, or are those 4 conferences going to kind of mold together, like what that's going to look like? So I think if we found ourselves in a spot where, as part of the Super League, we went to, as Kyle Whittingham said, like 2 super conferences, basically, that kind of just played each other, and it was that NFL minor league model, as he called it, then at that point, I think Florida State has some options, right? I mean, obviously now we're having a different conversation. So I think it's only one of those 2 situations that leads to these 2 schools getting out of their conference. And I'm still asking the question, much like you were, why would you want to leave right now? I mean, I've never heard either of these 2 say, yeah, you know what? Like, our grant of rights may be cumbersome in timeline, but it is this much money every single year for like 10 years. And then we could go out and build on top of that. So it just amazes me, like, how different the perspective is. This is the classic situation of, we're going to cry about what we don't have instead of appreciate what we do have. And that's what I think their biggest problem is.
I don't even think it's appreciate what you have. Understand the fucking market, bro. Understand that we are heading to a Super League, right? And to your point on Kyle Whittingham, 365 Sports, I think, got the most important sound bites out of Big 12 Media Day was Kyle Whittingham confirming everything that I've ever said, and the fact I wear a size 15 shoe.
So much change already, and there's more on the horizon. I can tell you that. We're not done. I think it's ultimately going to get to 2 super conferences and their own playoff system, and probably break away from the NCAA, have a commissioner and all. An NFL minor league model, I think, is where we're heading in that regard.
See, what happened was...
I mean, I don't know where you've ever heard that before. Come on.
And if you're Florida State, because they know it the same that Witt knows it, they know that a super conference is coming. An NFL model for college football is coming. We are in a situation now where, as we've told you, the NCAA isn't going to exist at the top tier of college football, right? We've talked about that for months on this show, that you are going to have a different set of rules. Last week, what did we get? Oh, yeah, hey, the G5 are fucked. We're out. They're not going to play at the top level of college football because they don't have the money to compete, which is exactly right. And if Florida State, do you understand? You're never making yourself whole now with how much in legal fees you reportedly spent.
Yeah.
Do you understand how much money the state school of Florida has spent in legal fees because their quarterback got hurt last year? Let that sink in. How much money just from that point forward Has the state of Florida, from, who was it? The Attorney General of Florida, Ron DeSanctimonious, spending $1 million. Like, do you understand how much money they have spent on this that they will never realize in return? And then take the legal fees that you spent trying to get out of the grant of rights. And ask yourself, how does the state school of Florida ever become whole from this?
Yeah, you don't. You're right. They don't. They don't. And again, I think that they, as a school, shouldn't be asking how they get whole. They should be asking, hey, how close are we to getting into trouble financially because of how much we've spent on this? And look, I'm not doubting, your donors and how much money is around that program. There's no question that that's a storied, institution. Florida State's football program is, has history, no question about it. But there is a limitation to everything, right? The old saying of a man's got to know his limitations. Florida State's got to know their limitations and understand, hey, at what point are we just throwing bad money after bad money? And I don't know when that's going to be, because it seems like they're still very much in the heat of this thing emotionally.
Yes.
And it feels like they're still very much like just, hey, full steam ahead, money, legal fees, find us a way out. And I think the best point that we've consistently made is, okay, let's say you do get out. Then what? Then what?
Because the ACC outside of football is a really strong league. I mean, well documented, the basketball programs in that league, the brands in that league. And I think when you look at the money that is going to continue to be poured into college basketball, because now it's a must-have, right? You look at this G5 depression where you simply have a bunch of basketball brands that play football. The majority of the G5, in my opinion, there are a lot of those brands that are football universities or basketball universities who football is an afterthought. Their breadwinner is basketball. You look at, and you don't even have to go past Gonzaga to see that, UConn to see that, how much you're subsidizing football at UConn, right? Like, those are the universities where you say to yourself, college basketball is what keeps us in business. Well, in the game that we're talking about, the top tier of college football is what keeps college basketball in business. And if you're Florida State, do you really want out of the ACC when you have a quality basketball program? They have a quality basketball program.
Yeah.
And I just continue to make the argument, this is a football problem. And Florida State's perspective is whacked here, because you are not, what you are trying to do is dissolve the ACC, which is one of the stupidest business decisions you will ever make. You're not good enough in basketball to win your own league, in my opinion. Stay in the ACC for every sport except football. That should be your plan. Oh, that's right. That's everybody's plan, because that's where college sports is going.
Yeah.
You don't want to melt down your basketball relationship with Notre Dame. You don't want to melt down your baseball, your stick and ball sports. You don't want to melt down your track and field relationships. You're in a good place in the ACC. Just chill out, play football, and let the eventuality, like, fix your situation. Stop spending tens of millions of dollars on legal fees and wasting taxpayer dollars so that Ron DeSantis can give you $1 million to fight. And we want access to every communicate. Fuck off. Like, you spend $1 million to look at people's emails who were like, okay, come get them. Sue us. Come get us. You have your $1 million war chest. Come. And what has come of that?
A lot of spending.
What has come of that? Nothing has come of that. Not a thing. Because you signed on to the process. You bought into the system. It's just, I'm telling you now, all this is a dog and pony show.
Yeah.
That's it.
And it's a bad look for Florida State. I mean,
that's it.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I just go back to Greg Sankey. Georgia didn't get in. and they didn't whine and complain and cry and bitch and moan. They didn't go to court. They didn't get their governor involved and their secretary of state or attorney general, because they're going to be back there next year. You know it, and I know it. Do I know that about Florida State? I kind of lean that way, because I think that what they're doing in Tallahassee, they have a great program. They have a great program. And all this other nonsense does is diminish that.
Yeah, I think
That's
I think the other thing, though, too, like the way I see it for Florida State is you're not as proven of a college football playoff commodity as Georgia is, or any of these other guys who are in it every year. I mean, that I also think is hurting Florida State. This would have been, had Jordan Travis not gotten hurt, this would have been your first appearance in a minute in the college football playoff. And I think that the problem is that even with, and again, my opinion, disagree if you like, even with a healthy Jordan Travis, I still think you lose to Georgia. I still think Georgia's a better team. I still think Georgia was more deserving based on the schedule they played and the players they had and the kind of team they had. So that's my opinion. Obviously, Florida State fans going to tell you differently, but I don't see a Florida State team that struggles to beat Clemson in league games coming out here on the same football field as Georgia and matching not only their physicality, but their ability on the football field. You're talking about Georgia and Alabama before this year essentially being minor league NFL teams. That's the kind of talent they had.
Well, and I look at Florida State with Roydell Williams coming in and DJ Uiagalelei coming in and Malik Benson coming in. Like, this offense is going to put points up. And I don't know. I guess we could debate who DJ Uiagalelei is as a quarterback.
Well, there's no debating it's his best option to win, or his best opportunity to win in his college career so far.
I would agree with that. And I mean, obviously, you're as good as Florida State was last year. You're going to have some dudes to replace, but Devontae Brown, like you look at their transfer portal activity, Marvin Jones on the end. I mean, you've got talent. That's who this coaching staff is now.
Yeah, and that's kind of the problem too. Like, I actually like what Norvell is doing.
Yes,
I actually think he's doing a phenomenal job, and it's really a shame because they're so wrapped up in all this stuff. And I know obviously it's not Mike himself doing all this, but the problem is that Mike didn't really have a choice. Like, you didn't get in, you did everything that you could. You suffered an untimely injury to your quarterback, and now all of a sudden your program is in this tough spot. And yeah, if you thought there was pressure to win last year, hey, Mike, in case you hadn't noticed, you might want to win this year. You might want to get to the Final Four, if you will, in the college football playoff this year to answer all those questions. Because I got news for Florida State fan. If you get in as like a 12 seed or a 10 seed and you lose that first game after all that talent came in and all the work Mike did in the portal and recruiting and everything, that's going to be a really bad look for your program. This is the year where you have to go out and you have to say, yeah, we are just as good, if not better than all those SEC guys. And I'm guessing, just to guess, there's going to be an opportunity for Florida State to go up against one of the better Big Ten teams in the playoff, assuming they make it. So I'm just saying, this is the year where you need to go out and win those games and show people who you actually are.
Can you believe, you have to replace your quarterback? So you go and get DJ Uiagalelei, great pickup. And then, toss him a bone and get Roydell Williams from Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, you did what you needed to do.
Yeah,
There's no question.
To your point, I think Mike Norvell probably is one of those under-the-radar coaches just because he doesn't have a big personality. You don't hear from him a lot. You hear from him on Saturday nights after they've won. And that's the sad thing about Florida State, is they're winning games. Like the Jimbo BS, like all that's gone. Like Mike Norvell has brought prosperity to Tallahassee, but we don't know about it because all we're talking about is lawsuits.
Yes.
So, facts. Anyway, all right, let's get your comments in here. As usual, the comment section is presented by our good friends at Prize Picks. Had a good weekend. Had a very good weekend on Prize Picks. I would like to thank Xander Schauffele for shooting the lights out on Sunday, winning good old Uncle Monty $56.25. Hell yeah, Xander.
Yeah.
Better dude than Xander Schauffele in golf right now? Probably not. He is such a good dude. He's won 2 majors. I love it. But I also love Prize Picks because you can play golf. You can play baseball. Football's coming. We are, 40-something days away from week
August 1 is your first preseason game.
I am so stoked that Aaron Rodgers is going to fail with the Jets. Cannot wait to see that happen. That the Chicago Bears,
The Bears, yeah.
Chicago, they're raving about my guy, Caleb. My guy, Caleb. Jim Romadunze, they're raving about him.
Are you going to on Sundays? Because it used to be that you would just
Shut
hang
up.
the flag.
Don't do
on
it.
Sundays,
Don't do
are
it.
you going to hang the flag, wear the jersey, and paint the nails?
What are you, JD Vance now?
Yeah, like what are we doing?
Oh yeah, Caleb Williams was a DEI draft pick. Come on, man. I'm excited about the Bears. I can't wait for football to get back. I can't wait for college football on Prize Picks is amazing. It is truly one of the most enjoyable parts about college football is Prize Picks. And all it really is Roydell Williams, 50.5 yards, more or less. That's your only proposition that you have to pay, consider. I lost my train of thought. That is the only thing that you have to decide. Is he going to have 51 yards or is he going to have 50 yards? More or less. That's it. Here's the blueprint. And I tell you this all the time.
Yes.
3 picks. Play it on flex, because the great thing about daily fantasy at prizepicks.com is you only need to pick 2 out of 3 winners to get paid at Prize Picks. It's that simple. Download the app, make a deposit, use the promo code Monty to get 100% deposit matching. That means you put in $10, they'll give you 10 more at Prize Picks. Download the app, use the promo code Monty. Let's get Luke Fletcher, who gives us 10, 20, and then $30
Who are
to
you,
say.
Florida State?
Poor coaching decisions, not ACC, kept Florida State out of the college football playoff. The quarterback should not have been playing the game that he got hurt. It's a very good take.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people overlook that. If Jordan Travis was healthy, they would have been in.
100%.
And we can sue, and it's what we've talked about all election cycle, all of life, all of sports. Just because you do not like the rules does not mean they don't apply to you. And the best part is it's in the rules of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. They can consider injury when determining who gets into the college football playoff and who does not. And when you lose your starting quarterback and you have no depth or experience behind him, and again, they're in that spot this year. When you look at DJ Uiagalelei at quarterback, you only have 3 freshmen behind him. Now, granted, Brock Glenn is a redshirt freshman, so he's been in the program, but no measurable playing time.
Right.
You have 0 depth behind DJ Uiagalelei. You need him to stay healthy.
Ride or die.
It's as simple as it can be. So I think that's you know what, Luke, and I know that you're an ACC guy. Now the ACC's better in basketball, Monty. Look, Morty, I don't want to hear about it, Marty.
It's a Big 12!
You are a huge ACC guy.
And by the way, something to watch out for this season, right? Did Mike learn his lesson? Will we see DJ get pulled later in games when they're up by 20?
Because they're going to be up 76-0 quite often.
Yeah, I mean, that, and again, I don't know their schedule off the top of my head, but that there's going to be games where they're going to be up by, you're going to have 8-9 minutes left in the third, and you're going to be up 27 points. You're going to be up 20 points. The game will have been decided.
Are you sure?
So when you play everyone's All-American from Dallas, SMU,
on September 28th in Dallas, because it says Dallas on the SMU
says Dallas
uniform.
on their shirt, on the jersey and stuff. When you're beating the hell out of them, are you going to take DJ out and get your backup some time?
You have one game of consequence on your schedule, in my opinion. And it is November 9th in South Bend, Indiana, against the Golden Domers of Notre Dame. Here's your schedule. Georgia Tech, Boston College, Memphis, and Cal. You finally leave home to head to Dallas to take on SMU. Then you're home for Clemson. Bye week at Duke.
Duke is Duke.
at Miami. Nah, that Miami game's going to be tough. It's Miami.
Yeah.
And Miami's really deep this year. I was reading through the book this past weekend. Miami's really deep. I think Mario Cristobal, this is clearly his best roster there, but this might be their deepest roster in some time at Miami. North Carolina, at Notre Dame, Charleston Southern, and then will Billy Napier still have his job on November 30th when he comes to Tallahassee?
No.
That's a one-loss schedule.
Yeah.
Because I'm giving you the Miami game. That Notre Dame game is going to be tough. It's going to be cold. It's November. Knock on wood. I don't want to get excited because my guy can't count past 10. Notre Dame looks pretty good.
Yeah.
So, and Notre Dame's schedule, again, I'm just saying, Notre Dame is going to, by November 9th, Notre Dame will be fairly well tested because they play Northern Illinois in week 2.
Man, wow, dude.
They're at it. Look at Notre Dame's schedule. At A&M, Northern Illinois at Purdue, Miami of Ohio, Louisville, Stanford, Georgia Tech, Navy, Florida State, Virginia, Army, and USC.
Stay hard.
At the Coliseum. That's a 2-loss schedule for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
They'll be top 12. They're going to the college football playoff.
Yep.
It's as simple as that.
Yep.
All right, let's see. Who else is in? Where are you guys at today? Jeremy Severe, hello. Ironically, they might spend more money on legal fees to get out of the contract instead of paying the $500 million up front. I talked to a guy who said he believes it is just short of $100 million in legal fees in total.
Dude, what are we doing?
Oak State James. I saw a video of a guy at Buc-ee's chopping up some brisket. I think I sent you that video.
You did.
Buc-ee's is on another level. What Florida State and Clemson should do is say, quote, let's play 10 league games and see if ESPN will give us more money. It would take the contract. It would make the contract worth more. Yeah, maybe. Tanner Plummer. All right, we get it. The ACC is sticking together. Let's move on. That can't be because the guy who's supposed to be dead said they're breaking up.
By the way, if you want us to move on, what do you want us to move on to?
Are you guys starting to understand that not everybody knows what they're talking about?
You know,
I hope at some point that we stop with this nonsense of, oh my God, the dead guy said they're doing this and taking it as fact. It's crazy to me how many people, and there's some guys out there that I think we talked about Jason Shearer. I think Jason does a great job with Arizona. I think you look at John Kurtz, his interview with Ross took off because people tried to change what Ross said.
Yeah.
365 Sports, I think, does a great job. Obviously, the big boys, I think guys like Ross Dellinger, guys like Pete the Mole.
Mm-hmm.
It's Thamel.
It's well,
morning. Did you say Bojan? Do you watch ACC football
games? You don't know anything about Florida State, bro.
Bro, do you watch Michigan football?